Good morning all, and welcome to the Standards Committee meeting of the 30th of January 2025. Could I please just take a moment to go through some housekeeping with you? May I remind everyone present that the meeting is being live streamed as well as recorded via the internet, and this recording archived for future viewing. If a participant wishes to speak, can they please raise their hand on screen or use the raise hand function? When invited to address by the chair, please could all participants ensure that their microphone and camera is on to ensure that they can be seen and heard when actively participating. Please ensure that all debate is raised verbally and not via the chat function for the sake of the recording. Thank you, Chair. That concludes the housekeeping.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everybody. Part one, item number one, apologies for absence. Amy, do we have any?
Yes, Chair. Apologies received from the Vice Chair, Mrs. Tinsley, and also from Mr. Alford.
Thank you. Item two, minutes of the meeting held on the 21st of November. You've had these minutes. I've read them through, and I think they're an accurate account of what happened. I had to approve them at the time. So is everybody happy, or at least those who were present at that meeting happy? I'll take silence as meaning everybody's happy.
Happy.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, sorry, I can't see you unless you say something. So I shall assume that unless anybody wants to object, those are an accurate record of what happened. Thank you very much. Item three, to receive declarations of interest and the nature of such interests under the Council's Code of Conduct. Are there any? Probably not. I don't think today. So I'll take that as that there aren't any. We move on to the reports of the monitoring officer, and item 4, applications for dispensation.
Thank you, Chair, and I can confirm that there are no applications for dispensation before the committee for consideration this morning.
Thank you very much. Item 5, observations by independent members of Standards Committee of the Vale of Glamorgan Council and Town and Community Council meetings. As you will be aware, and you hopefully have read from the papers, this work was done over the last few years. In my view, it was very successful. It taught us what was going on, and we were able to help town and community councils with some of their work, hopefully. So the situation, we'd agreed that we wouldn't do any during the current financial year, but then start up again in March. And really, today we're going to have to decide if we're going to do that, and if we are, how many, etc. So I'll ask Vicky just to elaborate on that, and then we can discuss it.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So just to remind members of the committee that as part of their role as a Standards Committee in promoting and maintaining high standards of conduct by councillors, co-opted members and church and parent governors, previously in March 2018, it was agreed that the independent members of Standards Committee would observe the Vale of Glamorgan meetings of the Principal Council, and that those observations be reported back to Standards Committee. Subsequently, on the 23rd of June 2022, as a result of resourcing implications at that stage, it was proposed and agreed by the Standards Committee at that time that those meetings would, or those observations of those meetings would cease, but that any concerns would be raised via the monitoring officer and reported through to the Standards Committee. During the period of the observations by independent members of the Standards Committee of the Principal Council meetings in March 2019, it was at that stage that the Standards Committee agreed that those observations, as referenced by the Chair, would be extended to observations of meetings of the Town and Community Councils, and they proved to be very successful. Subsequently, at the same meeting in June, at a subsequent meeting in June 2023, it was agreed that having regard to the programme of work of the observations of the Town and Community Councils at that stage, that those meetings that were observed where it was considered that the meetings were being managed effectively, that they would reduce in frequency to biennial as opposed to an annual basis, which was the intervals between those observations meetings at that time. So just to note that the verbal generic updates of the reports were regularly presented to the Standards Committee, and during meetings with the clerks of the Town and Community Councils, which my predecessor, Debbie Miles, and I now undertake, every 6 months, those observations were reported back during those discussions. And I have to say, clerks found that information extremely useful. So in taking stock of matters that have been ongoing within this area, and looking in particular at the proposed review of the local dispute resolution procedure, which is a piece of work which has been undertaken by a working group set up by the All Wales Monitoring Officers group. And the recent information that this committee has received reported through here late summer, early autumn of 2024 in regard to the work that the Local Government Association and the WLGA have been undertaken in relation to civility in public life. It's considered that this might be a timely moment to recommence the observation visits with effect from May 2025 to April 2026. And when we go to the agenda item, which the committee will consider in relation to the forward work programme of this committee, there's reference made to provision for reporting within the forward work programme. So just to remind members, and members would have noted that the pro forma that independent members use is appended to this report at Appendix 1. The schedule of the meetings will be set out in the forward work programme, which we'll come on to later in this agenda. And when those observations are undertaken, subject to that being agreed by the committee, those observations will going forward be reported back to the Standards Committee. Obviously, a matter, I think that's probably all for the committee to hear from me, but obviously a matter for members of the Standards Committee to consider.
Thank you very much. I'm going to ask all of you for your opinions in turn, and I want you to deal with it on the basis of whether you think they are worthwhile. If they are, whether we continue with them or restart them for next year, and whether the numbers suggested, which would be, there are 26 councils, there are 5 independent members, so that means doing 5 each, and 1 observation of a Vale of Glamorgan council, so that's 6 in a year. Whether you think that's appropriate, or if I just say my initial reaction was that was quite a lot, and perhaps we could do that over 2 years. But I'd like you to deal with it on the basis of whether you think they're worthwhile and whether they should be restarted, and if so, how many you think are appropriate. I'm going to deal with ask the independent members first, but the councillors, I welcome your thoughts as well. Mr. Alexander, what are your thoughts? Mr. Watkins, are you able to give us your thoughts, please? Hang on, Mr. Alexander's with us.
Chair, can you hear me at the moment?
Yes, yes.
I'm sorry, my camera doesn't appear to be working, so perhaps I might just say that I think these are worthwhile meetings, because otherwise we don't know that the standards which have previously been good, there's always the potential for these to go into a possible decline. And I think on that basis, they are worthwhile. My other observation would be that 5 meetings in a year to me also seems quite a lot. And I would prefer to spread it over 2 years if that were logistically possible. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Mr. Watkins?
Mr. Watkins, if you could press your activation button, please.
Yes, I personally don't feel that 5 visits is excessive. The other suggestion I would make is that we ring the changes. In other words, if one of us has visited a council hitherto, that someone else visits them the next time to get perhaps a more balanced view.
Thank you. I don't know if you commented at the beginning, but do I assume that you think they're worthwhile?
Oh, yes.
Yes, good. Thank you. Councillor Charles?
Yes, hello. Well, I feel as it is the independents that will be doing the actual reviews, then I would concur with whatever you find that the majority of you wish to do. And I think 2 years would probably be better to spread it out over.
Have people attended meetings that you've been sitting, and what was your reaction?
I actually sit on Barry Town Council, and to be fair, it is run, I feel, very well, as it should be.
Okay. Councillor Franks, are you there?
I am indeed. Nice to see everyone. I think there's a lot of value in these visits. And I know our policy is to seek to support town community councils rather than seek to find fault. There is an important difference, isn't there? And I like the fact that the emphasis is on improving rather than criticising. But I would ask the independent members to remember that there's a huge range of town and community councils. You've got very small councils to the likes of Penarth and Barry with substantial resources and substantial numbers of staff. So these differences need to be borne in mind. But in case you're going to ask me what my experience was, I think Mrs. Hallett came to Dinas Parish Community Council, and we tried to, at the end of the meeting, I tried everything to find out what she was going to say about us, but no, there might have been a little smile, but no, she kept her confidence. So there you are.
Thank you for that. Councillor Summers.
Good morning. Yeah, I think from a town and community council point of view, they are very useful, particularly as Councillor Frank says. If they're focused on trying to improve things rather than just criticise, although obviously where that's necessary has to be done. Generally, from a town and community council point of view, I think a standard meeting once every 2 years would probably be adequate, unless any shortcomings were identified. Certainly, from my experience, I think that was also from a visit from Mrs. Hallett. It was very constructive and useful. Yeah, I think that's probably everything, unless you've got any questions, Chair.
No, I don't think so. There will probably be other matters. Well, I think everybody's in favour of us restarting them. What is the cycle, Vicky, now with the elections, etc.? Because if we all did these, sorry, I'm getting a reverberation. Thank you. If we did it all, we did all these councils next year, in the next financial year, what would we do the year after? Would we again do none? And then when would the election be? Because I think we ought to spread it out.
So, Chair, thank you. So in terms of municipal years, we're about to start a new municipal year this May, so 25-26, and then we'll have one further municipal year, 26-27, and the next local government elections will be in May 2027. So that's 2 years. Also, I should remind the committee that following the Local Democracy Boundary Commission for Wales's review of town and community councils within the community area review, which was undertaken and reported on by the Commission in April 2024, currently Welsh Government are dealing with the final order, and when that's received, and I'm told that is imminent, the number of community councils will reduce from 26 to 18. I'll just double check that figure with the Electoral Services Manager, because I don't have the Commission's report up in front of me, but my recollection is it's 18. So that might impact then on the number of observations of community councils that the independent members will undertake during that period.
You've recommended that we do the 26th this year. What would you suggest then for the following year? Again, 26 or none?
I'd suggest, depending on the committee's view, if the committee is of the view that they split the observation meetings over a period of 2 years, and if that takes effect, that those numbers of meetings are reduced during the first year, and that we review the matter subsequently when the Welsh Government make the order, because obviously some of those community councils will no longer be in existence. There's going to be a period of time for those changes to take effect, of course, but I think we'll need to bring back a further report here to consider changes to that timetable.
Okay. Gerwyn, can we have your thoughts on it? It looks as if Ronnie, Alexandra and I think possibly that we ought to do half this year, I say this year, the next financial year, and then half the year after. Do you want to give us some other thought? What do you think?
No, I don't want to press that we visit them all in the coming year, but I think that is possible.
Yeah.
I'd be quite happy with splitting it, but we can decide what to do in the next financial year at the end of this one. Okay,
that seems fine. So we'll agree to that. The suggestion is that we will do a half of the town and community councils in this next year, and half the year after. That will be, of course, subject if there are any issues that come up and everybody wants, we're advised that there's problems with various community councils. We can go to those. Ronnie, I see your hand is up. Do you want to comment?
Thank you, Chair. Only to offer the observation that I wasn't quite clear as to the impact of the changes that Vicky referenced might have on this. I suppose my question is, if we were to visit them all next year and the number were to reduce, that may mean that we would be doing observations for town and community councils which were no longer extant, and that wouldn't seem to be a very useful time spent in actually observation. So just grateful for clarification on that point. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's a valid point, Mr. Alexander, and I propose that what I do is to communicate with the independent members regarding those community councils who, once the legal order has been made by Welsh Government, which is anticipated later this month, although that might change, that we look at the schedule, but it's agreed in principle today, subject to the Chair and the Committee's view, that those observations will take place on the basis that the independent members observe half this year, and we'll take a view then on the remainder of the community councils to be observed next year, the next municipal year. Factoring in for this year, those community councils that, subject to the legal order being made, will no longer be in existence. But just to make it clear that they don't immediately cease to exist as a legal entity, because there is a number of matters that need to be addressed to dissolve a community council under the regulations. But I will give that information to the independent members so that we're aware of the identity of those community councils.
Thank you. Councillor Summers, I'm aware you've got your hand up, and I'll allow you to come in now. But before you do so, I wanted also to raise the issue of whether we should give advanced warning of our attendance or not. This has been a bit of a hot potato over the years. I think when we had the meeting with the town and the clerks, they were equally divided. Some thought it was a good idea, some thought it wasn't a good idea. I suggest that we don't give we do give advance notice during the following year, but I'd welcome your thoughts. Councillor Summers. You're on mute.
Just pushed one button, but not the other. Yeah, sorry. On the point you've just raised there, I think my feeling from my contact with community councils is that generally it's more effective if they do have advance notice. I know there are pros and cons both ways, but I think really we do need to give the councils notice that somebody's coming. The other question that was really related to the discussion that Victoria started anyway, and my question was, although the order is imminent, my understanding was that it wouldn't actually come into effect till the next sequence of elections, and the councils would remain in effect until then.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, there's a period of time that has to contain all of the things that need to be undertaken in line with the legislation. So the next election cycle, so May 2027, we'll see those provisions coming into, those changes coming into effect. Can I also add, because it's been confirmed now to me, that the number will be 19, so it's a reduction from 26 to 19. So the 7 community councils that it's proposed are dissolved. But yeah, that's correct, Councillor Summers, Community Councillor Summers.
Thank you. And sort of in the light of that, may I possibly suggest that even if a council is going to be dissolved, maybe attendance might be appropriate, just to sort of find out how they are going to address that situation and how they propose to deal with amalgamating with whichever council they're being joined to.
A good point, I think, and possibly something we can look at possibly next year or the year afterwards. So if I've summed up the meeting correctly, we will resume these attendances in May 2025. It'll work in the same way in that the Vale of Glamorgan Council, Vicky and her team, will give us dates and point us in the right direction, and we'll do it on the basis that we'll do roughly a half this year, the next financial year, together with one visit to the Vale. I attended a full Vale meeting, which was interesting. And then we'll do that over 2 years. So if anybody disagrees with that, could they say so, please? Bill, your hand is up. I don't know if that was an old one. So Councillor Summers. You're on mute again.
Sorry, I keep doing that, pressing the one button. Yeah, no, it was just to add my strong support to the point that Councillor Franks made earlier about that the assessments need to take into account the size of the community council. I mean, there are vast differences in how, say, some of the town councils can operate with some of the very small community councils, and I think we do need to be very aware of that. Thank you.
Sorry, good. Thank you very much. We now move on to National Standards Forum update. You've had some details from Vicky of what was going to happen. I'm not sure there's much point in her going through that again, as of course this meeting has now taken place. I attended it, and perhaps I'll give you a very brief report of what happened. It was a very good meeting. It was meant to be from 2 o'clock till 4 o'clock. I think it ran on till 4:15 because there were a lot of things to cover. The agenda were 12 items and some weren't covered. The notes of the previous meeting were referred to and approved. If you recall, we do not have formal meetings. It's a private meeting, so people can say what they like, but the notes just give an indication of what happened. We had a talk from Pam Lucas, the Local Government Policy Division, Public Services and Welsh Language Group, and basically about the ethical framework review and a positional update. Frankly, I don't think there's been any progress since the last meeting or the meeting before that, probably. There seems to be still discussing whether ex-employees should sit on standards committee, whether there should be a period of grace before they do so. There's also an issue about whether ex-councillors should sit on the standards committee, on standard committees rather. And if so, again, a period of grace. There seems to be no conclusion about, no firm view on that. They're also considering our work, or Standards Committee works on various committees, I suppose, and whether, for example, with the councillors we deal with in various way, whether we should have powers to call witnesses to give evidence before us. But of course, then the question is, well, what happens if Joe Bloggs is called as a witness but doesn't turn up? What powers have we got? Frankly, there's been no great progress on that. And when asked, she said she didn't think there would be any more progress in the next 6 months. So, and this really goes back to Richard Penn's report, which was in 2021, Vicky, I think I'm right? Yes, she's nodding her head. So there's not a great deal happening there. We had a report from Michelle Morris, the Public Services Ombudsman for Wales. The code of conduct work is still very high. There are 2 town councils where there are 20 cases, and I think there are complaints made tit for tat, possibly between 2 councillors, where one is complaining about the other and vice versa. So that's taking up a lot of their time. Their work seems to be as busy as ever. She gave us a review of the independent review by Dr. McCulloch. If you recall, that was last September. It seems a long time ago now. We then had there was an item which seemed quite interesting, and I didn't know much about it, well, very little about it, where one of the chairs raised the issue of whether other authorities have signed up to the SLCC Civility and Respect Pledge. And that is apparently the Society of Local Community Councils, and or encourage their town and community councils to do so. I don't, Vicky, I have to plead ignorance and say I don't know anything about that. Do you know much about it? Have you heard of it?
Yes, I have, Chair, and it was discussed very, very briefly at the meeting that we had with the clerks of the town and community councils just before Christmas. And you'll recall that Paul Egan from One Voice Wales was present and referenced it. I do, in the work that I undertake in supporting town and community councils, reference it if it's something that they're not aware of and is something that they wish to consider. More recently, I've had communications with, and I haven't spoken to her yet about it, with Councillor Birch, who is the chair of Penarth Town Council, and referenced this to her. So it is something that I will pick up as part of my work with the support that I provide to town and community councils.
Good, thank you. So we are aware of it. There was general discussion about remuneration, and I think the consensus was that as far as independent members go, we don't do this work for the money, and I don't think we'll get rich on it. But I think it's fair to say that our rate of pay has not increased since something like 2021, I think. And council employees are getting whatever, 6%, 8%. And I think there was a view that we were being taken for granted. There was issues of whether, if the pay was more realistic, a lot more people would be interested in doing it. So there was a discussion on that. There was also the view seemed to be that there should be a national standards conference, which would probably be online. There used to be one of these where it was in person, and I think they were held in Llandrindod and or Aberystwyth. I never went to one. It was before my time. I think at the time of COVID, it was they were stopped, and then these half-yearly meetings were arranged. But I think it's right to say that Richard Penn said or suggested that the National Standards Conference should be held every year, so that there is a so there's a chance that that might come in. I have to say, this committee, the Chairs Forum, as far as I'm concerned, is progressing very well. I mean, it's only been going, probably there's been 4 or 5 meetings, and there's quite a lot of interesting discussion that goes on, and it's a good chance to hear of what's going on in other councils. So unless there are any specific questions on that, are there? No, it looks quiet. That's my report on the Chairs Forum, which took place last Monday. Moving on to item 7, Vicky, the Standards Committee Forward Work Programme.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And this is a regular report that comes to this committee. The suggested forward work programme for the municipal year 25-26 is appended to the report at Appendix 1. That's for committee's consideration and approval. Obviously, members will be aware that the Council's annual meeting will take place on the 7th of May this year, and following that, the first meeting of the Standards Committee, we will appoint a chair and a vice chair of this committee at that first meeting. Following the annual meeting, it's proposed that at the first meeting of the Standards Committee following the Council's annual meeting, that the committee consider an annual report for 2024-2025. So a couple of areas of focus that I just wanted to raise very, very briefly before the committee considers the forward work programme. Firstly, the standards of conduct expected by members, local dispute resolution procedure review, and the civility and public life programme. Following a full council meeting on the 2nd of December 2004, full council considered a motion submitted by the Labour group. Labour group obviously are in administration currently, and it related to the proposed review of the council's protocol of standards of conduct expected by members, and that is set out in our constitution under section 19. There was also a call for a review of the local dispute resolution procedure, which is a procedure that this authority has in place, and again is referenced in section 19 of the constitution when it deals with low levels allegations of breaches of the members' code of conduct. The chair and I have subsequently met with group leaders who have been made aware of the fact that the Monitoring Officer Group, the Wales Monitoring Officer Group, are currently as part of a small working group considering a review of the local dispute resolution procedure. And those discussions have been taking place. There's a further meeting which is taking place next month. And there is a consensus within that group that the monitoring officers won't be recommending to their respective standards committees that a model procedure is adopted by all councils, all 22 standards committees, rather that there will be a general consensus on the broad terms of the procedure and what that should contain and what it should deal with, because there's a variation in the procedures that are in place across the 22, and that those are reported back, those suggested proposals for review and amendment to the local dispute resolution procedure reported back to this standards committee in the case of the Vale, so the final determination will come from this committee. And with reference to the discussions that sit alongside those discussions with the monitoring officer group, with the group leaders, I think there was a general sense that because of the upcoming discussions at WLGA level and at Welsh Government level regarding the issue of civility in public life, and the fact that there is an event that's taking place in March, which will consider this issue, that group leaders, and the chair will correct me if I've missed anything, considered that we should await the outcome of those considerations before proceeding further. But it was just to make committee members aware that in relation to this aspect of the work that this committee will be undertaking, that the LDRP review will be ongoing in the background, and any further matters relating to the civility and public life work generally will be reported back here going forward. But there's provision made within the forward work programme for those reports to come to this committee. And I don't think there's anything else that I can add at this stage, but I'm happy to take any questions or votes or clarification.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions or any issues? No. So we'll accept that as the forward work programme as the basis, and we'll see how it develops during the year. Item 8, correspondence with the Public Services Ombudsman for Wales.
So this is, thank you, Chair, this is an update for me to provide to the committee a verbal overview of any correspondence which is with me currently in relation to matters arising as regards any complaints relating to breach of the Members' Code of Conduct. Those matters are obviously confidential, so at the appropriate time with the committee's agreement, we will move into part 2.
Thank you. Item 9, any items which the chair has decided are urgent. I don't think anything has been referred to me, so there are no items there. So if you agree, we will now move from part 1 into part 2, and there will be a short break.
Move part 2. Move part 2.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.